Why is diversity and inclusion crucial in STEM fields and in technology in particular? So there are these three major trends that we're experiencing quite dramatically right now that are going on in the country. And the first one is the major shifts in the demographics of the country. So by 2040, the country will be majority minority. So what does that mean? It means all of the children, more than half the children that are being born right now are non-white. And what does that mean? So that term by the Bureau of Labor Statistics covers a huge swath of people, okay? It both includes ethnicity and race. And so if we just look at the Latino population as well as racial minorities, if you add all of those people up, more than half of the children being born now are non-white. If you look at the folks who are 45, 50 and above, it's still a majority white population. So the next generation of employees, the people who are going to be populating our businesses, the people who are going to be perpetuating and building and sustaining the businesses that are already there, interestingly enough, don't look like the people who are there right now. So there's a significant demographic divide between, if we just look at corporate America and just look at the corporations and the businesses, and especially technology, there's a massive divide between the people who are there now and the people who will be the majority of our country in the future. This is not a bad problem. It's actually a good problem, because most people who run businesses want to perpetuate their businesses. They want to make sure that the next generation and the generation of that and after that are prepared and ready to become their future employees. So it's simply survival. And simply survival. We have to be able to have a larger diversity of people in our workforces to meet the demand of the workforce.
We'll hear much more from Mary Fernandez later in the course, but for now let's focus on the first trend she mentioned, demographics. In 2011, we witnessed a significant demographic turn in our country. For the first time, more minority babies were born in 1 year than white babies. This is happening at about the same time the white aging population started to decline. We're looking at not so distant future when whites will no longer be a majority in this country. In fact, there will be no racial majority. By around 2040, all minority groups combined, including Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, American Indians, and multiracial people, will together constitute 50% of the US population. In his article, The Diversity Explosion is America's 21st Century Baby Boom, author William Frey looks at the 2010 census data and observes a radical shift, which illustrates our transitioning from the mostly white culture that prevailed during the last half of the 20th century to a multiracial and a more globalized country. Quote, "If planned for properly, these demographic changes would allow the country to face the future with growth and vitality." End of quote. Yet it is optimistic to think that the old categories of minority and majority will just disappear as a result of this population change, and that we will simply move towards a more egalitarian society. Frank Bruni, the New York Times columnist, points out that the increased difference between members of our society, quote, "will exacerbate sharpening divisions, pronounced tribalism, and corrosive polarization." End of quote. One of the questions Earl Lewis and Nancy Cantor, editors of Our Compelling Interests, pose is this. Quote, "What are our shared compelling interests as a nation and civil society?" End of quote. If our shared compelling interest is to be more egalitarian, what steps should we take towards equality? There are those who make the argument that as the US population becomes more diverse, so will the workforce, including people in leadership. That this will happen eventually without the need of special pro-diversity policies or changes in our attitudes. That opportunities come to those who merit them. That racism and sexism are not as prevalent today as they were in the past. In this course, we will test these arguments by looking at how things are today and how we got here. The topics I'll be presenting to you are so wide-reaching and touch upon so many areas of study, it's almost impossible to do them justice in such a short time. For instance, in discussing minorities, our scope will be limited to ethnic and racial minorities. Meanwhile, one could devote an entire course to the struggles of the LGBTQ people, which is a vital conversation in our time. And on the subject of gender representation, our focus will be on men and women, so we won't have time to address the issues of transgender and non-binary people. However, much of the discussion will apply to them as well, as it will to other minority categories: socioeconomic, religious, regional, ability, and others. And of course, most of the people fall into multiple categories. In discussing race and gender, I realized that it would be impractical to separate them. After all, gender is part of everyone's identity. And the issues affecting, say, the Latino population may be compounded by gender issues in the lives of Latino women. Still, I wanted to create a convenient structure, and so the first session will be devoted primarily to the issues of gender discrimination, and it will be followed by the discussion of race and upward mobility in session 2.